program was recorded at the ARC Annual Industry Forum in Orlando, Florida. I'm pleased to welcome Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain, Russell Goodman.
Joining us for a conversation today on Enterprise Asset Management is Ralph Rio, Research Director at ARC Advisory Group. Welcome, Ralph.
Thank you.
Ralph, you just completed a survey on enterprise asset management systems. Tell us about it.
It was, well, first, let me define what enterprise asset management systems are. It's used to manage the maintenance workforce, labor, the materials they use, inventory, and is also extended into mobile applications so that people who are remote can know what to do and when to do it. And the nub of it, and I'm going to oversimplify just for a moment, the nub of it is what is the very most important thing for the maintenance people to work on next to ensure high uptime and reliability of the equipment.
So tell us about the
survey. Yeah, we surveyed 65 people who were deeply involved in maintenance, and maintenance managers or plant managers, people of those kinds of titles, and those people represented 1,000 plants, 1,300 plants. And if you add it all together, it's over 400,000 employees. So even though it's kind of a small number of, relatively small number of individuals, the information that came back was very comprehensive.
What would you say are the business drivers for using these EAM systems?
The primary business driver is machine uptime. And that is important so that production can meet its schedules. Obviously, if the machine isn't working, you can't make stuff, and then it gets difficult to meet the production schedule. So high uptime leads to on-time delivery to the customers. There are some other factors. One that, compared to previous surveys, kind of moved up in the rankings was cost control. Given the current economic times, that's understandable. So cost control moved way up. The third one has to do with how long an asset lasts. And when you maintain it properly, you avoid the capital investment to replace it, which can be fairly sizable. And the fourth one, which is always and very important, is safety. Make sure that the equipment operates properly so people don't get hurt. Those four are the primary drivers. Now, one that moved up, we noticed a significant uptick is managing energy usage and the cost of energy. So energy management has moved up as a driver compared to previous surveys. And that makes sense with all the sustainability initiatives going on. And I don't mean to denigrate them at all. They're all very important. But energy management moved up consistent with those kinds of trends.
Well, Ralph, let's talk about maintenance. How often is something like that subcontracted?
According to the survey and previous surveys, almost all maintenance departments subcontract some portion of the maintenance. And there are a couple of reasons for this. There may be a unique skill, and that can be driven by a particular equipment made by an OEM, and it's very complicated, computer driven, et cetera, et cetera. So the skills necessary to repair that equipment may need involvement from the OEM. So sometimes that's subcontracted. And other times it may be some kind of unique skill that or a trade that they don't have enough work to justify a full-time employee. That's the third reason. And the fourth, of course, is peak times, like a shutdown to do a turnaround, major refurbish some equipment in an area, this peak workload, so they subcontract that. On average, 29% of all maintenance labor is subcontracted.
Let's delve for a moment into EAM functions. What functions do they have now, and what's being planned?
Yeah, the primary functions that they have now, the ones that turn up near the top, were the predictive maintenance, which it means that it's tied into equipment that's monitoring in real time what's going on with the equipment. It could be like vibration control and stuff like that, so that if a machine is starting to vibrate a little bit too much, that's kind of a warning that, hey, well, maybe we need to pay attention to that. And that'll generate a work order for a maintenance person to go visit that machine. So predictive maintenance was a top one. And then some of the things that are kind of new that are pretty interesting is using RFID tags to keep track of spare parts and to know where they are in inventory, where they're being used. Sometimes what happens is when you may have a valve and you replace it. Well, the old valve isn't thrown away. The old valve is reconditioned. So you put an RFID tag on that so you can keep track of the history of that valve to know the next time you go put it in place, maybe you want to do some things to it to improve its reliability, or it's just good to know what the history has been on that in case something that breaks more than often once, and then maybe you need to do a little bit more research into why that particular part is failing more often.
Any other functionality coming down the pike that you want to share with us?
Yeah, there's one other one which is kind of obvious. Remember earlier I said a lot of the labor is subcontracted. So there is functionality to manage those contracts, service contract management. So that is another area of functionality that's very common and people are going to add on to it. And there's a lot of things around that, like what's the length of the contract, what exactly is the person supposed to do, what's the price. So it gets, when do I pay it? It gets kind of complicated, and having some functions that manage that relationship with the subcontractors is pretty important. Another one coming up, which is relatively small but is growing rapidly, a lot of people are planning to add it, is greenhouse tracking. So that, you think of an asset, what generates pollutants, gas, contaminated water and stuff like that, all that goes through the assets. So people are starting to realize that a way to manage your sustainability program, greenhouse gases and stuff like that, is through the assets, and have an asset focus to it. So by monitoring that stuff on an asset by asset basis and then bringing it through the EAM system, one can have a centralized reporting and management facility to manage all the greenhouse gas that's going on. Right now we see a lot of kind of point solutions doing one thing here and there in the plant, and no one has an overall view. We're starting to see people bring that stuff into EAM to give them a good overall view.
Ralph, final question. Any other conclusions, any other findings from the survey that you can let us in on?
Yes, there is a lot of application integration. Like I talked just briefly about the greenhouse gases, point solutions coming through. There are other types of solutions that come through. One has to do with condition monitoring, where there is an application that's monitoring the condition of a piece of equipment. I mentioned briefly vibration, so there's a vibration sensor on there. When it starts vibrating, now an alarm may go off to the operator. One of the integrations is to bring that into the EAM system to tell the plant manager to have someone go fix or look at the machine. Also with ERP systems, there's a lot of integration. So in a typical ERP system, you may have a purchasing module that buys parts so that you can make product. Well, integration with the purchasing module allows you to use that to buy spare parts for your equipment. Now, why would you want to use the purchasing module of your ERP system rather than one that maybe came with your EAM system? Well, there's a lot of governance around corporate purchasing. There's purchasing agents, someone skilled in buying materials. There's pricing that goes on, controls around financial controls, and you get to take advantage of all that stuff. And similarly, there's an inventory management, human resources. All those different applications are within ERP are good integration points for an EAM solution.
This has been some fascinating information, very valuable. Thank you so much for being with us today, Ralph.
You're quite welcome.
Ralph Rio, ARC Advisory Group, speaking with us today about enterprise asset management. Thank you for watching.